Congratulations, you've registered your Delaware Corporation. You've gotten your certificate of incorporation and everything looks good to go. Well, not so fast. Registering your corporation was more like setting up the frame of the company. You still need to add the walls, you still need to add any blocks, a roof, paint the house before the house is ready to move in. In this video, I'm going to describe 7 critical things you must absolutely do as a new corporation before your corporation is ready to go. Number 1, you must qualify the entity. Think about what you've done so far as you have created a startup in another state, Delaware. Delaware is the most popular state by far for many different reasons, including the fact that they have the most structured and the most advanced corporate law system in the whole country and maybe in the whole world. So you've done that, but you're going to be running your company from your state, the state you live in. And so you need to let your state know that you formed a new corporation and the corporation will be functioning within that state. This is required, by the way, by law. Typically, a state gives you 30 days from when you've started doing business within the state. So if you've just registered the company and you're going to be working from the state you live in, then your 30 days starts from when you register the company. So how do you do this? It's called qualifying the entity. So go to your Secretary of State's website and look for anything that says registering a foreign entity or qualifying an entity. If you find that, they'll detail exactly how you can qualify the entity. But again, the fees for not doing this can be very steep. So you have about 30 days or a little longer in some other states to get this done. So get that done immediately. Number 2, you have to resign the incorporator and set up the board. The incorporator is whoever filled up the certificate of incorporation, registered that with the state of Delaware. That's typically the incorporator. Their name is typically at the end of the certificate of incorporation as well. Now, if you had a lawyer or a service do this for you, then they've already resigned as incorporator and handed power back to you as the first director or to you and your co-founders as first directors. So this would have already been done by them. But if you did this yourself, if you registered the corporation yourself, then you need to get what is called a written consent or a written action by the sole incorporator and fill that out, take the actions required, resign as incorporator, and then assign powers back to whoever the first directors will be. This is typically the co-founders. So the sole incorporator will write in a document that so people will be the first board members of the company, and at the end sign off his name. And so power is then moved from the incorporator to the board of directors. We have a template at my website, so go to the description and follow the link there. It takes you to a template that you can download and then fill it accordingly. I'm also going to create a separate video for each individual thing I'm describing here so that it goes into detail and it tells you how to do this right. Next, you need to create bylaws. Now, in some instances, the incorporator actually creates the first bylaws and adopts them. So in that document I mentioned before, there's an option there for the incorporator to adopt the first set of bylaws. I don't typically recommend this, but it's your choice. It's doable. Some people do it because regardless of whether you do it there or not, the first board of directors will need to do this anyway. Now that leads to the next thing. If the first board of directors are doing this, it means that your articles of incorporation have expressly given them authority to adopt, amend, or repeal the bylaws. Check for that. Some certificates don't include this, and some do. So check your certificate of incorporation to make sure that it gives the board the power to adopt bylaws. If it doesn't, then the shareholders need to do this in a separate document called shareholders consent. So I'm going to have both templates in my description. Follow that and download whichever one is appropriate and fill it up and create your first bylaws. Now, the bylaws by themselves is a separate document apart from the adoption. Apart from adopting the board or the shareholders adopting it, they still need to create the bylaws themselves, right? And that is not best done in a template. It's best done by a lawyer or somebody who knows what they're doing. The reason is there are a lot of questions that you'll need to answer the way you want your company to be set up. So some bylaws have only a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer maybe within the bylaws, but some people want to have a CEO of a company, right? And so if you just follow a template without actually looking through, and then you call yourself CEO when the bylaws haven't given you the authority to be a CEO, then you're kind of stuck. But the bylaws is where every important thing in the company takes place. It describes the officers of the company, the powers of the officers of the company. It describes the way a meeting will be held. It describes the power of the board. It describes a lot of different things that are boring but are very, very important because they are statutorily required. So, including the fiscal year of the company. So go make sure you have a bylaws. If it wasn't adopted by the incorporator, then you have to do it as a board. But even if it was adopted by the incorporator, the board should still ratify that the adopted bylaws will remain the bylaws of the company. So that's number 3. Number 4, you need to issue shares and IP assignment. Now, this one is a bit upsetting for me because the first company I ever created before I was a lawyer, the person from the corporation didn't issue shares. So I was wondering what's next. This is a couple of years ago, so I'm thinking that service has improved now. But this is something you'll need to do. After you form the company, you have to issue shares. Unlike an LLC where in the operating agreement you describe the owners of the company and how much of the company they own, in a corporation, there's a bunch of steps. Think about your corporation as the central power of the corporation is the board of directors, not the CEO, not the president of the company. The board is the central power. The board then gives authority to the officers, including the CEO, to take certain actions. That's how it works. So every important thing that happens must go to the board first. Then it goes to the officers of the company to execute. Kind of like Congress and the president. That's exactly how it works. So your board you need to issue shares, and so your board needs to adopt a statement saying you are authorized to issue shares, certain number of shares, even if it is to yourself. The board still has to authorize that. After it's authorized by the board, then you as the officer of the company executes on it, and you do that by creating what's called a share purchase agreement. A share purchase agreement, you can find templates on our website, and another good website is the Cooley website, a law firm. They have pretty good templates there as well. Now, the share purchase agreement simply states that you as a company are issuing shares to shareholder 1 or founder number 1. And in exchange, the founder pays you some amount of money depending on the par value of the shares in your articles of incorporation. If you followed our previous video, then that's 10 million shares, but you're not issuing all of them. So let's say you're issuing 4 million shares to this particular founder. So the share purchase agreement will state that you're issuing 4 million shares at $0.00011 per share to so-so co-founder or to so-so founder. And so that comes to about $400 that the founder will pay. It's important that you send either a wire transfer, and in the memo you include the name of the corporation and why you are paying, why you're sending that money to them. That's very important. Or you do it the old-fashioned way and you write a check. Either way works, but it's good for record-keeping purposes to have that. And so the share purchase agreement also restricts the stock from transfer, because for security law reasons, you have to restrict the transfer of the shares in order to remain within compliance of securities law. So you issue those shares and you sign it as the person receiving it, and then whoever the president of the company signs the document as well. And then the secretary of the company, which is sometimes the same person as the president when a startup starts, because one person wears different and many different hats in a startup. So the president signs the document, you sign the document, and it goes to the secretary to save in a Minutebook, which I'm going to come to later. But you have to go through all of those steps. The board has to approve, then the officer creates and sends it to the person to review and sign. They can have their lawyer review, and then you execute it. This is also where vesting may come in. If you want to vest founder shares, which is recommended for companies that are planning on taking venture capital down the road. If you do it now, you have control over this vesting schedule. If you do it in the future, the venture capitalists will negotiate with you over that. And if you don't have very good negotiating a very good negotiating position, you may be required to take a worse deal than you otherwise would. Those are the things to think about. After you have issued shares, there's something called an IP agreement, and typically you want to sign these two documents together. The IP assignment states that, okay, in exchange for the shares I'm receiving, I'm going to assign all IP I built for the company so far. That could be code base you've written, that could be a completed app, that could be designs that you've created, but you assign all that to the corporation. If you're raising funds in the future, a venture capitalist or an angel who knows what they're doing will review all these documents to make sure that the corporation owns the property of the company itself. Because what are they investing in if the company itself doesn't own its own product? That's why. So you sign the IP agreement and the share purchase agreement together typically. After you've done all of that, the next thing is to create a minute book. This one is not popularly spoken about because it's an old requirement. It started at a time when corporations literally had physical books and they'd carry documents and save them in those minute books so that if anything ever came up, they can take the books to court and the court will go through them and assign authority and interest according to what they see in the book. In today's digital economy, you don't need to do that. What you need to do is make sure it's saved in a particular place. So have all the documents that are created saved in a particular place. It could be on Google Drive, it could be on iCloud. Save it in one place. And if anything ever comes up where it's needed, it's easy for you to print it and create a physical minute book if the court requires it. So have one place where you're saving all these documents. It's called a minute book. Very important. The next thing is to create an EIN. This one you'll have to do at some point either way. When you go to open a bank account, the bank will likely require an EIN. If you are doing any due diligence with any third parties, it will likely require an EIN. So just go ahead and create it. This is pretty easy today if you're a US citizen or if you have a social security number, even if you're not a citizen. All you need to do is go to the IRS website, you file, and in 5-10 minutes, you can have an EIN ready. We're also gonna make a step-by-step video on this. So if you're interested in that, subscribe to the channel and you'll get notified when that comes through. Next and last, you need to register under the CTA. This is a new one. The CTA is the Corporate Transparency Act. It's an act that was passed in 2021, but came into effect in 2024. And it requires that you register the beneficial owners of your company with FinCEN, that's the Financial Crimes Network. Yeah, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. You write down the list of all beneficial owners, anybody with 25% and above ownership in the corporation. You submit their name, their address, sometimes their passport. It depends on when the company was registered. If you register the company after 2024, there's more information that you have to give. So basically, just find out if your company, if it applies to your company. We expect that it will apply to many or most corporations formed, but it's still good for you to look at the requirements on FinCEN's website and see if it applies to you. If it applies, make sure you do that within 90 days if you're doing this in 2024 and your company was formed in 2024, then you have to do this within 90 days. If your company was formed prior to 2024, then you have till the end of the year, till the end of 2024 to get this done. And if you're watching this in 2025, then you have 30 days after you formed your company to register with FinCEN. Note that this may also apply to LLCs and not just corporations. So if you have an LLC as well, this may apply to you. These are 7 very critical things to do, and most of them have time limits to get this done. Like the CTA has time limits. The bylaws, you need that immediately. If not, many things can go wrong, and you're relying on the statutes to fill in any gaps that your bylaws have not filled in, which can be a double-edged sword. Get that done as soon as possible. Qualifying the entity has time limits, and everything else here has time limits. If you need the company to start operating, issuing shares, very important, it has time limits because You want to do this when the value of the shares are still minimal. So you've set a 0.001 value to the shares, they're minimal. But the more things you do with your startup, the more the value of the startup increases, the more a court may look at that 0.001 value and say, that's not the main value of the company anymore. So you paid less for it and you have to pay whatever the difference is in taxes. So get all these things done immediately after you formed your entity just to be safe. See you guys in the next one.